There are days when faith feels heavy, days when prayer seems unable to rise past the ceiling, days when motivation evaporates, hope weakens, and even the promises that once brought strength feel distant. If you have ever faced moments like this, then you need to understand how John Wesley prayed when discouragement knocked on his door. Because yes, he experienced seasons of deep spiritual frustration, inner doubts, intense criticism, and even the feeling of failure. And yet he did not give up. What sustained his soul was not constant emotion, but spiritual structure. Before any method, you must understand a fundamental truth. Wesley did not deny discouragement. He did not pretend to be strong when he was weak. He acknowledged the real condition of his heart. And that is the first step. Many people try to pray while masking their feelings, using the right words while hiding frustration. Wesley did the opposite. He began by recognizing his weakness. On the days when he felt spiritually cold, he did not begin by exalting his own faith. He began by confessing his need. His prayers often started with radical humility, acknowledging total dependence on God because he understood something. Profound discouragement reveals where we are trying to sustain our spiritual life with our own strength. So here is the first principle. Begin by admitting. Do not begin by trying to impress God with eloquence. Begin by telling the truth. I am tired. I am discouraged. I am confused. The prayer that heals begins with sincerity. But Wesley did not stop at confession. He structured his prayer in 3 clear movements: recognition, remembrance, and surrender. Recognition of weakness, remembrance of the promises, surrender of the will. After admitting his condition, he would bring biblical promises to mind. And here is something decisive. He did not depend on the emotion of the moment to remember the truth. He had already internalized the scriptures. When the heart wavered, the mind remembered. He would recite passages about God's faithfulness, sustaining grace and the perseverance of the saints, not as mechanical repetition, but as an anchor. This teaches us something powerful. On days of discouragement, you do not need new revelations. You need to remember old truths. The problem is not lack of information, it is lack of anchoring. Wesley understood that the human heart is unstable. That is why he trained his mind daily with the Word. So when discouragement came, there was an internal structure to sustain him. Now pay attention to the next step, because it changes everything. After recognizing and remembering, he surrendered his will again. In essence, he would say, even if I do not feel it, I trust. Even if I do not see immediate results, I remain. That is spiritual maturity, faith that does not depend on feeling but on conviction. Maybe you are thinking, but what about when prayer feels dry? Wesley experienced that too. There were seasons when he did not feel immediate comfort. And what did he do? He kept the discipline, because he believed that daily faithfulness precedes inner renewal. Here is a practical model inspired by him that you can apply in your difficult days. First, choose a specific place, even if it is simple. Consistency in the environment helps the mind enter a posture of prayer. Second, begin with an honest confession of your emotional state. Third, read aloud a biblical passage previously chosen for moments of weakness. It can be a psalm of trust. It can be a promise about perseverance. Fourth, turn the text into personal prayer. If the verse says that God is refuge, say, "You are my refuge today." Fifth, finish by reaffirming commitment even if you do not feel enthusiasm. Now understand something essential. Discouragement is not proof of spiritual failure. It is part of the journey. The problem is not feeling weak. The problem is abandoning discipline when weakness comes. Wesley faced public rejection. He was criticized inside and outside the church. He was misunderstood. He faced resistance even from people close to him, but he kept the rhythm of prayer. Not because he always felt like it, but because he knew that perseverance produces stability. There comes a moment in the spiritual journey when you realize that prayer is not merely an emotional response. It is continuous alignment. What sustained Wesley was not the absence of discouragement. It was the decision to pray even when the soul was weary. He did not wait for his heart to improve before seeking God. He sought God so that his heart would be strengthened. Perhaps today you are exactly at that point, tired, questioning, without the intense flame you once had. Then pray like this, with honesty, with remembrance of the promises, and with renewed surrender. Do not wait to feel first. Pray first, and I want to turn this into a practical action right now. If you are going through a difficult season, write in the comments, "I choose to pray even in discouragement." Leave your like so that more people can find spiritual direction in moments of weakness. And subscribe to the channel, because in the next part, we will go even deeper into the specific words Wesley used in his prayers and how to structure a personal prayer guide for days of spiritual crisis. Because in the end, spiritual maturity is not defined by the absence of storms. It is defined by the decision to keep praying in the middle of them. There are moments when discouragement is not just a passing feeling, but an entire season. Days turn into weeks. Weeks begin to feel like months. Faith does not completely disappear, but it loses its brightness. Motivation does not vanish, but it weakens. And it is precisely in this kind of scenario that the spiritual discipline of John Wesley becomes more relevant than ever, because he did not learn to pray only on days of victory. He learned to pray at the bottom of the valley. And here we must go deeper into something few people understand. Spiritual discouragement often does not come from the absence of God, but from the excess of human expectations. Wesley faced this many times. He preached with fervor and in some places saw little immediate result. He expected rapid transformation and encountered resistance. He invested energy and received criticism. The human heart, when it creates rigid expectations, tends to become frustrated when reality does not match them. On the days when this happened, he did not run to distractions. He ran to the prayer room. But how exactly did he structure that deep prayer? It was not emotional improvisation. It was intentional construction. First movement, emptying wounded pride. When we are criticized or ignored, our ego reacts before our faith. Wesley knew this, so he began by examining his own heart. Is there pride here? Am I seeking approval or faithfulness? These questions are not comfortable, but they are liberating. Because many times discouragement does not come from real failure, but from wounded pride. Perhaps today your discouragement is not a lack of ability, but an excess of comparison. Perhaps it is not an absence of purpose, but misaligned expectations. Wesley learned to adjust the heart before asking for change in circumstances. Second movement, returning to divine sovereignty. He reaffirmed that God reigns even when results are invisible. This is essential. Discouragement grows when we believe everything depends on us. Peace grows when we remember we are instruments, not the source. In his prayers, he often reaffirmed trust in God's character, not only in isolated promises, but in character itself, faithfulness, justice, mercy, constancy. When you anchor your faith in the unchanging character of God, the instability of circumstances loses power. Now let us go even deeper. Wesley understood that emotions follow focus. If you concentrate only on what went wrong, discouragement grows. If you direct your attention to God's past faithfulness, hope begins to reignite. That is why he practiced intentional gratitude even in difficult seasons. He remembered moments when he had already been sustained before. This created perspective, and here is a practical exercise inspired by him for days of deep discouragement. Take a piece of paper and write down 3 moments in your life when you clearly perceived God's intervention. It does not matter if they were big or small. Remember the details. Pray thanking God specifically for each one. This reconfigures mental focus. But Wesley did not limit himself to internal reflection. He also sought fellowship. When he was discouraged, he did not isolate himself completely. He spoke with trusted brothers, shared struggles, and prayed together. He believed that communal faith strengthens individual faith. This is crucial today. Discouragement grows in isolation. Hope grows in communion. Now imagine the following structure of prayer to apply when the weight becomes too heavy. Begin by honestly declaring your condition. Do not edit your words to sound spiritual. Say exactly what you feel. Then confess any attitude that may be amplifying discouragement, comparison, impatience, pride, fear. Then read a passage of scripture out loud, not only silently. The voice engages the whole body in prayer. Turn each sentence into a personal declaration. After that, thank God for at least 3 evidences of His faithfulness in the past. Finally, reaffirm your commitment. Even so, I will remain faithful. This last part is decisive, because discouragement tries to negotiate perseverance. It whispers, wait until you feel better before continuing. But spiritual maturity says, I will continue even without immediate improvement. There were periods in the life of John Wesley when he questioned the effectiveness of his own ministry. He even wrote about moments of inner coldness. This shows us something powerful. Even spiritual giants face internal shadows. But the difference lies in the response. He did not dramatize weakness. He brought it to the presence of God repeatedly, again and again. There is something deeply transformative about faithful repetition. It is not the intensity of a single prayer that changes seasons. It is the consistency of many. Perhaps you are waiting for an extraordinary experience that will eliminate discouragement all at once. Wesley did not seek emotional shortcuts. He sought progressive stability. Now pay attention to this point, because it may change the way you pray. Wesley often included in his prayers a specific request for purity of intention. He asked God to purify his motives, because he knew that discouragement often arises when our goals are mixed with personal ambition. When the focus returns to faithfulness rather than recognition, the weight becomes lighter. Discouragement is not a signal to stop. It is an invitation to go deeper. When everything feels easy, our prayer can become superficial. But when we face internal or external resistance, we are forced to seek more deeply. Wesley went through criticism, persecution, frustrations, and seasons of spiritual dryness. Yet he maintained a pattern: pray before reacting, pray before deciding, pray before giving up. Imagine the impact of that on your daily life. Before sending that impulsive message, pray. Before making a rushed decision, pray. Before concluding that nothing is working, pray. Not as an empty ritual, but as real alignment. And perhaps what you most need to hear right now is this: discouragement does not define your spiritual identity. It is a temporary condition, not a permanent diagnosis. But the way you respond to it can shape your growth. So I want you to turn this moment into a practical decision. If you are going through a difficult season, write in the comments, I will not give up. Leave your like so that this message can reach someone who is silently struggling. And subscribe to the channel, because in the next part we will explore the specific words that can form a structured prayer for days of intense crisis, almost like a guide you can follow whenever your heart feels heavy. Because in the end, spiritual maturity is not built on days of enthusiasm. It is built on days of discouragement, faced with persevering prayer. There comes a point in the spiritual journey when discouragement stops being just a passing sadness and becomes a persistent fog. You wake up, and it is still there. You pray, and it seems the words fall to the ground. You read scripture and feel no immediate impact. It is exactly in this kind of season that the discipline of John Wesley reveals itself to be deeper than many imagine, because he did not only pray when there was comfort, he prayed until the light returned. And here we need to touch on something sensitive. There are days when faith feels mechanical. You do what you have always done, but without the same fervor. Many interpret this as spiritual regression. Wesley did not interpret it that way. He understood that the spiritual life has rhythms, and that consistency protects the heart during cycles of low emotional intensity. He did not base his security on the feeling of the moment, but on ongoing commitment. When he faced seasons of coldness or exhaustion, he did not radically change his practices. He deepened them. He intensified self-examination. He reorganized his focus. He asked himself where he was allowing excessive distractions, where he was letting negative thoughts grow without confrontation, where he was allowing small compromises to accumulate weight. This self-examination was not obsessive. It was strategic. He believed that discouragement is often amplified by silent neglects, small daily distractions that slowly pull the heart away from the centrality of God. Perhaps your discouragement today did not come from one great fall, but from many small disconnections accumulated over time. Excess comparison, little gratitude, lack of proper rest, constant exposure to negative news, conversations that drain your energy, repetitive thoughts of failure. Wesley learned to identify these roots before simply asking God to remove the symptom. And here is a powerful key. He treated discouragement as a call for spiritual reorganization. When the soul was heavy, he adjusted three fundamental areas: time, thought, and fellowship. First, time. He reviewed his routine and reinforced the priority of prayer, not as an obligation, but as refueling. He understood that what you prioritize shapes your emotional resilience. Second, thought. He confronted automatic thoughts. If the mind repeated, "Nothing is working," he responded with biblical truth. "If I am not capable," appeared. He reaffirmed dependence on grace. He did not allow the mind to become territory without vigilance. Third, fellowship. He sought conversations that would build him up. He shared struggles with spiritually mature people. He believed that shared faith reduces individual weight. Now let us build something extremely practical for you to apply. On days of deep discouragement, pray like this, in a structured and persistent way. Begin by saying, "Lord, I recognize that my soul is downcast." Do not romanticize it. Do not minimize it. Name it. Then say, "Show me if there is something I need to adjust." Stay silent for a few minutes. Allow thoughts to surface. Sometimes the Holy Spirit brings subtle convictions. Then declare, "Even if I do not feel joy right now, I choose to trust." This sentence is powerful because mature faith is not dependent on immediate emotion. Then read a passage of hope out loud. Do not merely read, emphasize the words. Turn the text into a personal declaration. After that, thank God for something specific from the day, even if it seems small. Gratitude breaks cycles of mental negativity. Finish by saying, "I will remain." Now understand something decisive. Wesley did not measure spiritual maturity by emotional intensity, but by faithful perseverance. He knew that there are days when prayer feels dry, yet they are still days of invisible growth. Have you ever noticed that roots grow in the dark? The tree does not immediately show it, but the underground system is being strengthened. The same happens in the soul. There are seasons when God works more deeply in the internal structure than in the external appearance. Wesley went through severe rejection. In some places he was prevented from preaching. In others he was criticized for his style. He could have interpreted this as failure. Instead, he chose to see it as an opportunity for deeper growth. Perhaps what you are experiencing today is not defeat. Perhaps it is training, but training requires endurance. And here we reach a crucial point. Discouragement feeds on automatic negative interpretations. If you interpret every difficulty as abandonment, the weight increases. But if you interpret it as part of the process, your perspective changes. Wesley maintained a long-term vision. He did not evaluate his journey based on one difficult day. He looked at the entire path. Perhaps you are evaluating your spiritual life based on one bad week. Expand the horizon. Remember what God has already built in you over the years. Now imagine applying this consistently for months. Instead of reacting emotionally to every fluctuation, you respond with structure. Instead of giving up in every difficult season, you go deeper. This is what transforms ordinary people into spiritually stable leaders. And here is the climax of this journey. The secret is not eliminating discouragement from your life. The secret is learning to pass through it without losing your spiritual rhythm. Wesley did not pray only to feel relief. He prayed to remain faithful, and often the relief came after persistent faithfulness. Perhaps the light has not yet fully returned for you, but keep praying, keep declaring truth, keep adjusting your heart, keep seeking fellowship, keep persevering. Because there is something discouragement cannot endure: consistency. If you remain, it weakens. If you persist, it loses strength. If you pray even without feeling, your inner structure becomes stronger. And now I want you to turn this into a concrete decision. Write in the comments, "I will pray until the light returns." Leave your like so this message can reach someone who is struggling silently. Subscribe to the channel to keep learning the deep principles that shaped men like Wesley and that can strengthen your own spiritual journey. Because in the end, maturity is not never feeling discouraged. It is never stopping prayer when discouragement arrives.